Hello, my name is Melissa Phillips and I'm an English EAO and Italian teacher at Cardine College in the southern suburbs of Adelaide. I've been involved with Reading to Learn for 3 years now through Chris's leadership, and she's asked me to speak a little bit about my experiences and my reflections on using Reading to Learn as a pedagogy in my mainstream classroom. So first of all, if there's one thing that I tell people about Reading to Learn, it's that it is 100% worth the time and effort initially required for planning and preparation. I think that's one thing that really daunts people. The pedagogy is fantastic for really explicitly teaching students how to work with texts, and particularly academic texts, and then in turn produce and understand why they're producing in a certain way a range of those academic genres that previously maybe their language levels didn't allow them to do or prevented them from accessing. Probably the key principle that I think makes Reading to Learn so successful is the fact that it's based on equity. That's really its cornerstone. So education, particularly Catholic education where we work, is all about social justice, and those Reading to Learn principles really help to break down those social, cultural and even language barriers that might stop EAL students or struggling students from accessing the curriculum at an age-appropriate level. So it really levels the playing field in the classroom. Rather than the high flyers taking over, they still develop and they're still pushed and extended, but it gives all learners the chance to be successful in their literacy across the curriculum. The difference in my teaching over the last 3 years is huge, and that's mainly due to Reading to Learn and the other courses that have gone with that. Now, my engagement with the Reading to Learn professional development has really increased my understanding of how to explicitly teach language and literacy. It's probably something that prior to Reading to Learn, it wasn't that I didn't understand the texts that I was teaching. I had quite a reasonable understanding of them, but I didn't necessarily know how to, or have the toolkit to help my students to understand them and help my students to understand the language that really forms them. So yeah, I struggled probably to make text explicit to my students other than my own interpretation or explanation of it. I'm now far more meticulous in my approach to teaching academic genres, and I'm much better equipped to teach students the language and the meta-language that's involved with reading and writing and taking that to the next level, taking their skills to the next level. I've also taken this explicit teaching of language and text structure into my role as an Italian teacher, and am currently using it to develop my students' understanding their understanding and application of language in context, which is a far more practical and far more engaging way of doing it than learning lists of vocabulary and verbs, which I completely understand would be quite boring as well. So that's something that I've been able to take away from Reading to Learn, from originally using it in my English classroom to using it in my Italian classroom, and then hopefully being able to apply those skills across the curriculum wherever I might end up teaching. In more specific terms though, I now use the Reading to Learn cycle or elements of it every time I teach a text in any subject. So the intensity of the strategies that I use depends on my student cohort. I'd be much more likely to use the intensive strategies with middle school students or the younger students that I teach, or EAL students or students with learning difficulties who might need a higher level of support when it comes to language and literacy. I still maintain the explicit teaching with my senior students, but I'm able to provide less scaffolding to those students to begin with, and then remove it at a greater rate than might happen with my middle school students, which is what you'd expect. But certainly, as much as Reading to Learn is highly scaffolded, the idea is for that scaffolding to be gradually taken away, and those students then do the text independently, or do literacy independently, really. Some of the differences that Reading to Learn has made to my students' learning and their attitudes, and even the things that I've observed or heard while we're using the strategies, I've noticed that they engage more effectively with texts and are more confident in giving answers in class discussion. They know that they will be called on to give a response. They can't just rely on the student who knows it all or picks up on things really quickly, they will have to give a response, but they're also aware that they will be able to do so successfully if they're paying attention. So I think that's a really important thing. Any student can give the response as long as they are paying attention and engaging with the text. More solid evidence of this improvement in learning and attitude came when I engaged with my students' PADA and NAPLAN data, so their standardised testing data. At the end of last year, Year 8 students who had been exposed to Reading to Learn had improved significantly in their reading comprehension, and we could see that from their results in their PAT-R test. Their scale scores for a few of them went through the roof. On the other hand, my principal and I also explored the 2013 NAPLAN data. So there was the results of Year 9 students Year 9 students in 2013 who'd been exposed to Reading to Learn the previous year in 2012. So there were 2 teachers, myself and another teacher, who'd been using the pedagogy with the Year 8s in 2012. So we then checked their NAPLAN data the following year, and comprehensively, students who'd been exposed to Reading to Learn, who'd been in those 2 classes using that pedagogy, had improved upon their Year 7 NAPLAN results by, on average, a significantly greater margin than students who had not been exposed to its principles. So that was a real kind of feather in the cap, so to speak, for Reading to Learn at our school. And Reading to Learn has gradually started to make a difference in the school. It certainly makes a difference in the classroom immediately, or very, very quickly. On a school level, as is always the case, it does take a bit more time. But some of the differences that I've noticed have been through leadership response to the pedagogy, but also the willingness of other staff. So whilst our principal's always been very supportive of the teachers who have been using Reading to Learn, the data really gave him definitive proof of its success in being a maths teacher. He liked the data, which is great for us too, and it sold it to him. So he's really keen for the pedagogy to be expanded, probably starting with our Year 8 English teachers and hopefully branching out from there. And that was the plan for this year, but unfortunately there have been a range of circumstances that have prevented us from rolling it out at this stage. But it's certainly noticeable that a range of teachers are interested in engaging with team teaching and observing the strategy being used. And more of our teachers are being released, being allowed by leadership to attend workshops in functional grammar that are being run by Catholic Education, which is, again, a positive step in the right direction. It's now about how we bring that together as a school and get the ball, if you'll excuse the idiom, get the ball rolling. Where to from here? For me, ultimately, I'll continue to use Reading to Learn wherever my career and wherever my teaching will take me. I would hope that maybe in the throughout this semester and then possibly next year, I don't know, we will be able to introduce that a little bit more to our school context across the board, or to the broader context of our school. On a personal note, for me, the network that Reading to Learn has allowed me to form with teachers from across Adelaide has been very useful for support, because it does take a lot of work. So you do need those support networks to help when you first start with Reading to Learn, and also for sharing resources, ideas and feedback, so that we're not always recreating the wheel. I'm also currently involved in a project with the languages team as a LOT teacher at Catholic Ed SA, and what I'm doing as part of that project is exploring Reading to Learn's implementation in a LOT classroom, so in my Italian classrooms, in order to meet the understanding and application of language systems requirement of the Australian curriculum, which has just been released. So there's lots of positive opportunities, lots of strengths, and areas for us to work on as a school as well, in terms of really using Reading to Learn to its full potential. So, thank you.